Welcome to Kindred, hosted by me, Kate, and my sister, Jen. In this podcast, we explore our human relationship to animals and nature. The abrupt human disconnect created by the pandemic, like for many of us, turned my world and business, Otis and Rude dog collars, upside down. But it also emphasized the critical need in myself and others to reconnect to animals and nature for our overall well-being.
Join us every week as we interview scientists, conservationists, animal advocates, authors, and many others.
In connecting to our world, we also connect to compassion, empathy, and understanding. How can we see ourselves as not separate from animals and nature, but as a part of an active ecosystem? Welcome to Kindred.
Yes, indeed.
Welcome back to Kindred, right?
Once again,
we are here with Kindred talking about the animal nature world. And this conversation we have coming up is very near and dear to our hearts because we're pretty wolf obsessed.
Yes, pretty wolf obsessed. Pretty much my whole life, I think I've been obsessed with wolves.
Yeah. We even went to a wolf retreat for wolves. I wouldn't call it a spa, but it was
a wolf.
Amazing. A wolf. What is that? What was it?
Sanctuary.
Wolf sanctuary. Yes, thank you. Where when we walked up to see them, it gives you chills down your spine. They are impressive animals to see in real life. So yes, today we are interviewing what we call fondly the Wolf Lady. Her name is actually Karin Vardaman, and she is the founder and director of Working Circle in wolf conservation. But before I get to that, the highlight today I want to tell you guys about is since we're doing wolves, I thought we would do a dog.org, a foundation focused on dogs. And this one is called Frosted Faces, and they rescue and rehome old dogs, which to me is just amazing.
Yeah.
And you can find them on Instagram, Frosted Faces, their handle. And then frostedfacesfoundation.org is their website.
And where did you say they're out of California?
They're out of California. And it's just one of those things where, when I used to work at the SPCA, it was the hardest to see the old gray faces coming in. And, sometimes people were dropping off because they had to move, or the owner passed away and there was, whoever was in charge of them at the time couldn't keep them. And it's heartbreaking to see. And talking about it even too much is I'll just start crying.
Too sad. Yeah.
But this is a great organization. They are out of California. Follow them at least on Instagram. Check them out. They've got a great story, and it's just it's something that I would love to do when I'm a little less mobile. I just want to adopt a bunch of old gray-faced dogs and
let them live out their days in some dignity and
spend all my money at the vet with them. But
I was gonna say you might have to be a little less mobile and a little more flush. Yeah.
Yes, but that's okay. It's going to be worth it. And so check them out. Back to our guest, Karin. Like I said, she is the founder and director of Working Circle. We first came across Karin through an incredible article written by Ingfei Chen in The New Yorker called The Persuasive Power of the Wolf Lady. To bridge the divide between wolf lovers and ranchers, the conservationist Karin Vardaman had to change many minds, including her own. That's quote from The New Yorker. And Karin definitely shifted my perspective.
Yeah.
Absolutely opened up my heart to the ranching community in a new way. Mm-hmm. And just the work she's doing. She loves wolves. And she used to be in marine conservation. And the way she came to wolves is just an interesting little curious story. And
it really is. She tells it really well too. And it's just sort of like, you just don't always know where life's leading you.
Yeah. Like in a moment, suddenly your life is like, oh my goodness, now she was going straight and she just took a right and then hasn't looked back.
Which is so cool.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. Yep. So she's incredibly inspiring. She's a kind, an intelligent woman, and we were so grateful to be able to talk with her. And if you guys want to check her out, which please do, you can find their programs and how they're implementing them out of Colorado and Northern California at workingcircle.org. So jump on their website and check it out. And we will see you guys after the interview. Enjoy.
Yes, enjoy.
Karin, hi, hello, how are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Thanks so much, Kate.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today here to talk about wolves. We are super excited. It's one of our favorite topics. We often talk about maybe one day someone will take us on a wolf safari. We can go see wolves running around, but we'll see. We'll see how that works out. But thanks so much for joining us, Karin. If you could just tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Certainly. Well, first of all, it's really an honor to be here. So I appreciate the invite and the opportunity to spend some time with you all. My name is Karin Vardaman, and I am currently the co-founder of Working Circle and currently the director. And we are a nonprofit organization that, even though we're based in Colorado, we got our humble start in California. I was a beach girl. Wolves were the farthest things from my mind at that time. Big ocean person, ocean swimmer, distance swimmer, and grew up with horses. And my mom really instilled that love of animals in us early on. So all animals, wildlife, and other were an important part of our family. And at that time, Laguna Beach was surrounded by nothing but open space. So we had a lot of critters, coyotes and bobcats and mountain lions. And so that's kind of where I grew up until, just 6 years ago when I moved here to Colorado. It's perfect for my work too.
So how did you come to then wolf conservation and then ultimately working with Working Circle?
Well, it's not something I planned. I was looking for a new screensaver for my computer. And I was looking for like a whale, because I love whales, sea lion, something marine oriented, maybe a tall ship. And I was just going through all of these things and came across this picture of a wolf face. It's kind of a classic picture you actually see everywhere. I've never seen it. And I know this sounds really corny, but I don't know, something about his eyes and the way he was staring at me. I was just fascinated by this photo. So I just started reading about them. I mean, I always thought they were really cool animals, but I never really thought about them that much. And the more I learned about them, the more I became quite fascinated. And then I received a surprise birthday gift to go to the California Wolf Center. And I remember arriving there and it was just this instant love. And I only really the wolves were pretty shy, so I didn't get a real good look at them. But I just knew then that I needed to volunteer there. Just dove in. I went through the training as quickly as I could. I learned how to give the little public talks. I remember when I got to do husbandry and the first time I was in the pens and I got to clean up wolf poo. And so through there, I took a wildlife handling course and just continued to grow through volunteering there. They got a grant. So I applied for it. I got it and literally gave up my whole life and was there as a fundraiser. And at that point, OR7 had come and gone and they had set up the stakeholder working group. And the gentleman who hired me, Patrick Valentino, who became my mentor and is still my mentor and dear friend, actually president of Working Circle now, he ended up hiring me to be the director of California Wolf Recovery. I mean, I was surrounded by these brilliant scientists from, all these organizations. It was what I had to do, and I can't really explain it. And that's when everything really changed for me, because as I sat on that group and I listened to these brilliant people, everybody seemed to come to a table with their prepared arguments, and they were listening in order to then say what they had to say. I didn't feel like people were listening to understand. And I was so nervous, but I wanted to speak up because I could see this disconnect. And I felt like I knew what was going on, but who was I to speak up, you know?
Right. But at that point, nobody else was noticing what was actually happening here.
No. And everybody was in their corners, so to speak, right? And so I talked to Pat, you know, my mentor, my boss, and he's like, you just go for it. You know, this is why we hired you, you know, think out of the box. It's probably better that you didn't have all these years of indoctrination because maybe you can see things differently, right? So I did. I spoke up. And I remember the director of the Farm Bureau was like, oh my gosh, finally, you know, and it just started my conversations with the ranching community. I started to sit with them and have lunch with them. And then I got invited out to the ranches, and it changed my whole perspective, because those folks that were willing to take a risk on the wolf person, right, open up their hearts and homes to show me their world, I felt like a veil had been lifted in my own understanding of the whole situation. This began my journey to go at wolf conservation from a very different direction. And I started to develop this philosophy that, you know, wolf recovery is not linear, and neither is ranching. And yet we tend to stay in our corners and work in this vacuum, right? And then there's the whole human dimension side of it, right? Perception. And how does that play into it? And as I started to think about it even more, I realized, I said, you know, wolves don't die because they eat an occasional cow. You know, that's not why they're dying. It really goes back to the human dimension side, this lack of understanding, this perception, and a lot of fear, rather perceived or real, to the folks that feel them, they're real, you know. And so how do we look at this from a kind of a three-legged stool perspective? I mean, for wolves to be successful, ranchers need to be successful. You know, for wolves to be successful, ranchers need to be successful. People need to be doing okay because they're part of it. The wolves aren't the problem. The cows aren't the problem. The people are the problem. You know, so I thought, well, what if we start going at this and looking at wolves, livestock, people on an equal playing field? Focus at all three and see what happens. And so, we did.
Just a quick question. Has this been a conversation that has happened prior to you? This seems new to me.
Well, it's not new now. Okay. It's not new now, but it certainly was then. And that's the thing. I'm super happy because, you know, fast forward 10 years, everybody's focusing on the human dimensions now. And it's great because it's so needed. But when I first went down that track, people looked at me like I was some sort of alien. But it worked, you know, and I remember thinking that down the road is that, you know what, people can say all they want, but it works. And so I really focused at going about this through the ranching side, like getting at the root. What is the real root of this problem? So maybe it's time to change the paradigm of how we approach and define success. That includes wolves, livestock, and people.
Right, especially when they're, I would think maybe feeling as though they're not being heard. And so that's like everything is, if you don't feel like you're being heard, you're going to dig your heels in deeper, possibly, and stay with your own ideology of the history of your own family, your own ranch. And then this is brilliant of you to have this observation, because then what can possibly change if both sides can't be heard?
That's exactly what I was thinking. This is such a bigger conversation. You could apply this to the political climate right now. You could apply this to everything. When we can only see our perspective and we can't include the other in the conversation, it's just exactly that. Whether it's, the eco-terrorists, the people who are like, oh, well, they're just so extreme and nobody's listening to each other, then nothing gets accomplished and the divide just increases. And I feel like this is going to be groundbreaking work, because this is what we need as a world to start to be able to do, to stop otherizing and to be able to see how can we work together and how can we be creative and inclusive and actually listen rather than just not talk until the other person stops.
No, you're absolutely right. And, you spoke to a couple of interesting different points is it's interesting. I kind of call it value-based conservation, because when you're talking about human values or people's values, it's so much about their identity, and for these ranchers, they've been on that land multi-generational. This is their culture.
No, of course.
Well,
They have a deep connection to the land,
right.
And yes, their cattle and their land is first priority. But doesn't that even mean that possibly they have certainly a deeper connection to it and the possibility of understanding how wolves work within that system far more than I do?
Absolutely. And as you are so right, Kate, because they know the land better than anybody else. They're out there every day. They know how the prey and the ungulates use that land. Those that live with wolves get to know how the wolves use that land. Wildlife depends on a lot of the open space that private landowners provide. But because of that, co-occurrence with livestock and carnivores is going to happen. And that is reality. Ranchers need to accept the fact that there's this, whole new awareness of the value of carnivores, and they need to be able to accept that and figure out how to work with that. We need to accept that ranching can be a very positive part of the story. They're not the villains. They can very much be the heroes.
It seems to me that from hearing you talk, I hear your respect for the wolves and your respect for the ranchers. And I think that's a huge key, Karin, that you can't really fake, that you actually are coming from a place of respect, and that it takes a certain level of evolution as a human being to let's try to be a little more creative. We're really smart. We know so much about so many things. If we can use that information to actually reimagine the conversation and to come at it from a completely different way rather than just trying to push an agenda, which we all know doesn't work. It generally makes people just dig their heels in.
I think so too. And I think this is where then enter Working Circle. Tell us the objective of Working Circle then.
Yeah, certainly. And you're absolutely right. Through this journey, I have come to really honestly love the ranching community and those people. So it is a deeper thing for me, I guess. And maybe that is an advantage. I don't try to leverage that on purpose, but there's no doubt that they have tired of folks coming in saying, oh, I'm going to help you and reach out to them. And they're like, what are you reaching out with? Because they are very sincere.
There's so much kindness and understanding in this conversation. I have that for the families and the generations that are ranchers and for the packs and the generations of the wolves. It's truly is. It's emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a huge parallel there. And that's what I think is amazing about all this, is there's a huge parallel between the two. And I think that the wolves are going to teach us, ranchers and advocates, a lot. So that's kind of how Working Circle was born. And so Working Circle was created in partnership with Northern California ranchers. And so I was looking at what are the ranchers' needs? What is it that they need? Well, they want to be economically viable. They want to ensure their grandkids can inherit their ranch. They want to be able to take care of their cattle and provide them quality of life. They really care about their animals. They want to be able to just maintain what they've been doing for generations. And now you've got, carnivores coming back to the landscape, providing one more challenge. They have so many challenges already, and wolves are just a small, and they know it is, but it can still be tough. It's true that wolves don't impact the ranching industry as a whole or livestock industry as a whole, but for the individuals that might be, it's devastating. Well, it turned out, as I mentioned before, that some of these herd and land management strategies, you talk about Bud Williams' low-stress livestock handling, rekindling the herd instinct, and how you work with your cattle and you equip the cattle with the confidence and tools to take care of themselves on a landscape with wolves.
Interesting.
That's so clever.
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
Think about how wolves hunt, right? They hunt in packs because they aren't actually designed that well to get to hunt, and so they have to hunt a certain way to be successful. Very risk averse, they're not ambush predators, right? So they kind of have to plan things out, and they have a high sense of self-preservation. So when they look at what they're going to hunt or take down, they're always weighing the risk of getting hurt and the vulnerability of the prey. So the reason they hunt from behind or want to get an animal to chase is they can bite from behind and weaken the animal. Because if they're facing the animal head on, you've got hooves, you've got antlers, you've got bigger animals, because they like, as we know, they like elk, right? They like big critters. And wolves get injured seriously and killed hunting. Constantly testing their prey, trying to get them to run, and then they look for weakness, single that animal out, and bring it down. That's how they do it. So if you at Yellowstone, so there's a brilliant gal, Hillary Anderson, and she was a scientist in Yellowstone and then married into a ranching family long, long ago, multi-generational ranching family. But, she noticed that, when wolves got the elk to run, great. However, when wolves approached bison, what did the bison do? They bunched up. They grabbed their young, and they bunched up and they stood their ground. And wolves are just like, I don't know what to do with that, right? Discovered, in working with cattle as a livestock producer, that guess what? Cattle inherently are more like bison naturally than elk, mentally speaking. But they've lost that herding instinct because they've got to scatter. So what happens? Wolves are always, again, looking for the most vulnerable prey. So if ranchers are going to raise prey, their cattle, in wolf country, they best start to make sure that their prey are the least vulnerable on the landscape. And they're not always, right? So what happens? Wolves come along, the mama cows panic and take off. The babies are laying there. Just like that. Super easy, right? So Bud Williams, and it was really not related to protecting cattle from, wolves at all, introduced this low-stress livestock handling, and it's an art form. It really is. And it's working with the mentality of the cattle, in a calm way and with how they think. Instead of the Yahoo pushing them, them and all the things you see like on TV. It's very and it's all about your body energy and where you place your horse, or your body with the cattle, and basically getting them to do what you want, but it's their idea to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Through that, you're reminding the cattle that the herd is a safe place to be. So they learn that the herd is a safe place to be. So then through that, once the cattle are calm and confident and conditioned, so to speak, you can rekindle the herd instinct.
Right, because that stuff imprints on them genetically, and that's going to work for them at the time. And then their babies are going to be like, oh, this works. This is a good thing. And we're also going to do that.
Right. So it takes about 3 generations of the cattle. But then what happens, wolves come along. Instead of them running, they grab their babies and they stay together in a herd. Mm-hmm. And the wolves are like, I don't know what to do with that.
So they move on.
Now, it's amazing to see how it works, because I've seen it. I've seen wolves go right through cattle, and the cattle are like, yeah, whatever. And so it also lowers that whole stress factor, because the ranchers often say, oh, gosh, it's not just the fact that they kill my cows, but they create a lot of stress and they're not gaining weight. Well, it takes care of that too. So again, now what do they, and then through this herding, if they do what we call prescribed grazing, also moving the cattle on the landscape together as herd units, it's better for the land too. So you improve your land health. The grass is healthier, has more nutrition. So they can take 1 bite of grass for the same nutrition. It might take 3. So they can actually have more cattle on the same landscape, improves the water health, wildlife habitat. It creates this whole dynamic of this amazing scenario. So what happens? Ranchers are more economically viable. They're more resilient. So if, they do lose an animal to a predator, it's not quite the end of the world. They can preserve that ranch because it's economically viable for the next generation. They can use fewer people to do the work because you only need one person, compared to 8 to move the cattle. They get their ranch and what they want, right? And we get our wolves, and the state agencies who have to manage them have a lot less heartache, right? Headache. So you've got the win-win scenario.
That's how it works.
That's the
right.
answer to this is what Working Circle
It's empowerment. Right.
Well, I think because of where we are, back to what you were saying, Jen, too, about this is the conversation that I believe is starting in a different way across the board. And so I think that applying this model of conversation and education, understanding, and empowerment, it's going to take time, like you say. I think it can't not build momentum, because I think there's just enough people maybe who, like you, Karin, that are doing this amazing life work, that it really will move forward. And again, maybe it's going to also take 3 generations, right?
Easily.
Imprinting on us the same as it's imprinting on the cows. How can we be imprinted by this and shift over a few generations? And that's okay.
Yeah,
We
because
just want
real change takes time.
So I just want to move on now to, not that this isn't just, that's all the fun part too, but I just want you to talk to us about then what's the setup of wolves and their family dynamics and pack life in general.
Certainly. Well, I would say that wolves, in the way they live and their pack life, their social dynamics, I think was one of the first things that really caught my attention. Just how highly sophisticated they are socially, for a wild animal. I mean, they're amazing. And you can see why they've captured the imaginations of literally every religion, every culture the wolf is in throughout history, more than any other critter. And it is because they're so fascinating. So a wolf pack is basically one family unit, generally. This is like most of the time, but there's always the exceptions to the rule. But it's one alpha male and female, or mom and dad. And wolves will generally mate for life. Not always, but generally. And then they'll have a couple of generations part of that pack. So they may have, the young pups, the yearlings, 2-year-olds, and then those that decided not to disperse for whatever reason. So the pack is one family unit. So if a wolf wants to breed, then they need to disperse. They need to leave the pack and find a mate. And sometimes it happens by another dispersing wolf kind of flirting or hanging out and recruiting, a wolf. And that can be, a problem, because if they get caught, the alpha male and female will then, try to kill that wolf or try to steal their pack members. Or a wolf can just decide to, both male or female, take the journey, and leave. This is why they travel for hundreds of miles. And so generally when they're about 2 years old is when they, start thinking about heading out. You see it sometimes at 1-year-old if the resources are low, meaning there's not a lot of natural prey to support a pack. Sometimes you'll see it older. And so pack size is often related to how much natural resources there are. So like in Yellowstone, they've had some historically big pack sizes because the resources were amazing. Territorial, tribal, so to speak. So they will battle over territory, and they usually have very clear territorial lines. So for example, when it's time for them to have pups, they'll usually not, choose a den site close to the edge, right? Because they don't want to have another pack come in and create issues. So they breed once a year. Both males and females come into season once a year. And they generally will have, their pups will be born in, we say Mother's Day, around early May is when they're born. And so the female will dig a den pretty deep, and they usually will go fairly deep and then the den will then kind of curve up to avoid water flooding. And they keep their dens very clean to avoid the smell of other predators, coming in. So the pups, they can have anywhere from, 2, large, litter might be 8, but 5 is average. And those young are, they can't see, they can't hear, they're very vulnerable. And then about 4 weeks of age, they'll start coming out of their dens and starting to explore a little bit. And it's a full-time job for mom. During the time that the alpha females with the pups, the alpha male is bringing her food. She can go for a while without food, but usually the den site's fairly close to water because, they do need water regularly. So, and they're very protective of that den site, the whole pack. So then when the pups are a little bit older, then oftentimes one of the pack members will be a nanny, and they will bring them to what's called a rendezvous site. So they'll move away from the den, and once they're out of the den, and move to another area, and they have a rendezvous site where they kind of hang out. So at least one of the wolves will stay with the pups while the rest might go hunt, and of course, pups are first priority. It's all about those pups, so they'll take care of them, they teach them, they regurgitate the food for them. And, eventually the pups can start going on hunts, but they usually start out just by watching, and of course, then they learn to hunt like squirrels and, things like that. But, very much like dogs, they're very cute. They play, they're very silly, all those behaviors. But what's amazing, I think, to me about wolves, I think the thing that has always caught me the most, considering their highly social dynamic, is they're one of the only wild animals known to take care of each other when they're sick, injured, or old, even when resources are low. So they don't always follow the same old survival of the fittest. They bring food to each other. They protect each other. There've been blind wolves that have been taken care of, and it's an amazing thing how they do that, and that's why a lot of American cultures, the way they take care of each other and how bonded they are and how they each have a role in the hunt. And it's very coordinated, the team dynamic, the family dynamic, multi-generations. They're really amazing. And their language. I mean, they never stop talking, not always vocally, but just their body language, how intricate it is, and how each family member has a different role in that family, and how important that balance is. And when they lose a pack mate for whatever reason, they mourn that loss. And it's horrible. I mean, the sound of their howl is the most mournful thing. And it takes a while for them to get over it. I mean, they're highly intelligent when it comes to social dynamic. But it's just sad that they've been so misunderstood, because historically, if you think about it, they're actually very shy and skittish people. And so, folks didn't see them a lot. They would hear their howl, right? And they would, and then they might see evidence of a kill, which looks terrible, very vicious, right? So she goes wild. When you don't understand something, you're often afraid of it.
Absolutely. And there is something about that wolf howl that is haunting, and you hear that. Of course, humans would be like, maybe I shouldn't be here.
Of course, all the fairy tales and things, which is just so it's But yeah, they're pretty incredible. And then, obviously ecologically speaking, as a keystone species, it's much more than that when you look at it ecologically. People say, well, it's because they weed out the weak and they make, the rest strong. But it's really more the fact that they keep the herds on the move, because when you don't have a predator keeping the herds on the move, they'll stay in one area and they can overgraze, right? That's why the same thing with cattle grazing. We talk about using this model, moving them around the landscape healthier. And same thing with the fact that you've got wolves around, those elk keep moving. So they can't overgraze and destroy those mini ecosystems, right? That other critters depend. So it has that cascading effect. But regardless, wolves are here and they exist. because nature meant for them to exist. So clearly their role, whether it's a keystone species or not, I mean, most scientists believe they're a keystone species, are very key. They're still have an inherent right to be on the landscape. Regardless of human value, regardless of our judgment, they have a right to be here, an inherent right, just because nature intended them to be here and to do a job.
They're such a beautiful, impressive species that, again, back to working circle in your work, just if we can understand the role they play, the value they hold, and how there is no other, we're a symbiotic planet here. And if we can just get back on board, however long that takes, and reconnect to the depth of value that we hold for each other, this can all shift in a very natural way. Like I said before, Mother Nature's already set this up to work really well. And so I think just the work that you're doing is amazing to us. And I really think it's exceptional and it's forward thinking. And that's where it might actually stick and work.
I hope so. That is, so kind of you. Kate, thank you. I feel very humbled. But we have to look forward, right? We can't be stuck in the past, because we may all be part of individual communities, but ultimately it's all interconnected into a much larger community. And if one part's broken, it affects everything else. And we can't just do things the way we've always done them. We can't just think in ways we always have because it's convenient. And we can't do things for any other motivation other than it helps the cause. It's the right thing to do. We have a long way to go, but there's so much hope. And it takes folks like you thinking the way you do.
Absolutely. Well, I think they are, and we're listening, and hopefully more people can listen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And I do think other businesses are going to look to this sort of model. I would be surprised if other people don't.
So thank you so much, Karin.
Well, thank you. I'm absolutely honored to be here, and I appreciate that opportunity. So it takes a village, as they say.
Hey guys, I wanted to tell you a little bit about Otis and Rue dog collars. We design and produce high quality, small batch dog collars with adorable matching keychains and super cute dog bandanas. We use new ribbon, vintage ribbon, and 100% cotton and wool fabrics. Our styles are one of a kind, and we always design with 3 priorities in mind: quality, style, and comfort. And don't forget, we give you a free matching keychain with your dog collar so you can always match your pup. We are passionate about giving back to our animal community, so with every purchase, we give a portion of proceeds to animals in need. We care deeply about the organizations we support, and we will always keep you up to date on who they are. Go to our website, otisandrue.com, and check out our merch and help support our favorites. That's otisandroo.com. otisandrue.com, where we design to create connection. All right, guys, we are back with a takeaway, and we have 2 things that we wanted to highlight, and a major awareness that shifted both of our understandings hugely, I think. The first was highlighting the ranchers using Bud Williams' method of low stress livestock handling. That was a new idea to me. And through science, we can actually find real working methods to better connect an issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that in using science and observation to study these animals, we can influence them to be more their animal selves.
Right.
Through our just paying attention to how they do things naturally, and how that whole thing of how, they've gotten away from their herd mentality, and then they scatter, and then babies picked off. Perfect. Yeah, I mean, that was really, really good. And I feel like what's so mind-blowing for us is that it's already there. It's just someone gave us the key to remember.
Yeah. And this guy, Bud Williams, has uncovered that. And now Karin is implementing that. And it's actually working with the wolf rancher conflict, which is incredible. So the second one was how alike to wolves we are. And when she talked about how, they care for their sick, they care for their injured. But I really let that sink in, how alike we are to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that how the whole group helps to care for the young, that if there's a blind wolf, it doesn't just die out in the wilderness. They care for it its entire life, that they practice compassion.
Yeah. I mean, just such respect for their empathy and caring and their love for one another.
Absolutely.
Was really, let's be more like that.
Yeah.
So the main takeaway, I think you and I both thought was, Karin bringing this new awareness and now working circle, approaching this conflict with a new conversation in a new way was huge. And you talked a lot about how that was across the board, something that, this resonates through a lot of life.
Well, and just how succinctly she summed up what we do so much of the time. We're quiet until the other people stop so we can make our point. But she's actually saying, let's actually hear each other. Let's actually respect each other's perspectives and actually try to understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
Like, that is pretty new.
I think she's another conservationist that's taking shame and guilt out of this bigger conflict.
Absolutely.
Which I think is amazing.
And the work that can then get done, the business that can actually be accomplished then, it's just really exciting and encouraging where this could take conservation and the world of people and animals and those conflicts.
Yeah, and empowering for the ranching community and life-saving for the wolves.
Yeah.
I loved talking with Karin.
Yeah, it was great.
It was just, just again, hearing another person who's doing incredible work.
Absolutely.
To shift the whole getting just back to supporting Mother Nature. Like we've said again, this is all set up to work. So let's try to relearn how it works the best.
Amen.
Amen. All right, guys, I just want to let you know where you can find more about this subject. If you want, you can get onto @stockmanship.com. That's the Bud Williams Stockmanship website. And there's actually a really good article by Temple Grandin. And it's the link is grandin.com/ I think, b.williams.html. You can just Google that and you'll find it. And then please check out Karin's website, workingcircle.org. So thanks, guys, again for listening, and lots of love. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Kindred is hosted by me and my sister Jen, produced by Kat Gaddy and myself, sound production and editing by Dan Cooper, original music by Ellie Grace, and our Kindred artwork was created by Lindsay Coffin. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and feel free to contact us through our website, kindredpodcast.co, where you can also find all our links to our socials and Patreon page.